Welcome to the Culture Hour. I'm Thomas Rain Crowe, your host. And this morning we're back again in the studio with Lee Knight for part two of our conversation. And after our last conversation with Lee, we decided that what we would try to do is focus on work songs and union songs and protest songs, labor songs. Lee's got a great list of songs in his repertoire, and he's going to really just kind of hold forth this morning for us and share a lot of his knowledge and experience, and of course the songs that we all know, or maybe a lot of them that we don't know, from workers across the country, labor movements and such. So good morning again, Lee.
Good morning. Good to be with you again.
Yeah, how you doing?
Doing great.
You've been busy since the last time we talked?
Yeah, I've been quite busy.
Yeah, been out and about. I think you took a long trip not too long ago.
Went out to Tacoma, Washington, and did a program of civil rights songs.
See, well,
Yeah.
that ties right into where we're going then.
Doing a lot of songs I haven't sung in a while.
Well, we'll take that as a segue right into what we're going to talk about this morning, which is, like I said, the labor songs. And what have you got for us this morning?
Well, I've been fascinated with the labor songs for a long time, and I don't get a chance to sing them very often, so most of these I have not memorized.
Mm-hmm.
Plus, getting older, the memory's fading as well. But I thought this morning we'd basically focus on songs that were written by working people,
Mm-hmm.
people involved in working, and also involved in trying to make changes in the work conditions. And I thought I'd set the scene by just doing the chorus of a song. One of my favorite labor singers is John Hancock's. He was one of the founding members of the Southern Farmers Tenant Union and wrote some wonderful songs that we're still singing to these days. And one of my favorite titles, There's Mean Things Happening in This Land. And if there was ever a time, 2019 is a lot of mean things happening. And the chorus goes, there is mean things happening in this land. There is mean things happening in this land. But the union's going on, and the union's going strong. That there's mean things happening in this land. And the song goes on, but I just love that chorus.
Yeah.
It's just such a great way to start. Well, while we're singing unaccompanied, let's go back into the mid-1800s. Back in the early times, and to some extent, sadly still today, but less so, there's more protection of workers than there was in the 1800s. But back in the 1800s, if you were injured on the job, that was your tough luck. There was no compensation. You had to provide your own health care. If you couldn't work again, then that was just too bad.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a rather powerful song. I don't know who wrote it. It comes from the mid-1800s. It's called The Blind Fiddler. And there's three stanzas of it that people sing all the time, but I found a couple extras, so this one's going to be a bit longer than usual, and it goes like this. I lost my eyes in the blacksmith shop in the year of '56, while dressing of a key punch which was out of fix. It bounded from the tongs, and there it sealed my doom. I am a blind fiddler and far from my home. I've been blind for 30 years and more than half my life. Tried to make a living for my child and my wife. In order to accomplish this, I am compelled to roam. Oh, I am a blind fiddler and far from my home. Farewell to my home, for I can no longer stay. Hard times and misfortune have forced me away. Hard times and misfortune have forced me to roam. For I am a blind fiddler and far from my home. I've been to San Francisco, I've been to Dr. Lane. He operated on one of my eyes, but nothing could he gain. He told me I'd never see again, and it's no use to mourn. I am a blind fiddler and far from my home. I have a wife and child depending now on me to share all my troubles, whatever they may be. I hope they may be cheerful while I have to roam, for I am a blind fiddler and far from my home. An amazing song.
Yeah, it's a sad song.
Sad song.
A lot of these songs are kind of sad.
Well, they are. Well, and they actually arrange some. Of course, the ones trying to organize, more uplifting and a little bit more up tempo. But that one always sticks with me for some reason. I think in most of the jobs I've had, if I got hurt, it was my tough luck.
Yeah, that's kind of how it works a lot.
Yeah. So, in the labor songs, there's a variety of them. There are some which are designed to help you work. They have a rhythm to them. Others of them are laments, like the one we just heard, people complaining about how hard things are. And then you have the songs that are designed for change. This next one is kind of a combination, and it comes from just down the road, Swannanoa.
Really?
This comes from the building of the railroad when it was coming up from Old Fort up toward Asheville.
Oh, yeah.
And they built, I think it was 6 tunnels there, and the longest tunnel was the Swannanoa Tunnel. And it was something like 1,600 feet long or something like that. And they had the tunnel all built, and after it was built, the workers, who were all convicts, this was built by convict labor, which also meant black.
Right.
In fact, if they ran out of workers, the state of North Carolina would arrest people for loitering and spitting, and then they would lease them out for $250 a year to
Gary
different
Carden, a
companies.
local storyteller here in Silva, has done a lot of research on a issue where there were black laborers building a tunnel right here, almost outside of town, and all of them died.
Yeah.
And it was a fiasco of
That was a boating accident, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, the railroad was built by convict laborers, mainly black. And when you're building a railroad, back in those days, they didn't have the equipment they have today, so everything was done by hand. So when they built the railroads, they had what they called track lining gangs. And actually they were called Gandy dancers because the tools were made by the Gandy Tool Company. And after the bed was down and the ties were down, you had to put the rails in place, and the rails had to be the right width and also very stable. And so they'd have gangs of workers with hammers and sledgehammers, and so they had these songs called track lining songs. Hey boys, can't you line 'em? Hey boys, can't you line 'em? Hey boys, can't you line 'em? Hey Eloise, we're lining track. Well, this next one comes from Swannanoa, and it started out originally as a track lining song. I originally learned it as a banjo tune. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but as a track lining song. Asheville Junction, Swannanoa Tunnel, that's my home, baby, that's my home. Well, as I say, I first learned it as a banjo tune, and I think from Bosco Lamar Lunsford, maybe, where I learned it from a recording. I never met him.
Oh, I was going to say.
So what we've got, and this is sort of fascinating to me, I'm going to play it now as a banjo tune. So what we've got is an African instrument, the banjo, a work song by African American workers as a white Appalachian Mountain banjo tune. There's a message there somewhere. I'm going back to Swannanoa Tunnel. That's my home, baby. That's my home. Asheville Junction, Swannanoa a tunnel, all caved in, baby, all caved in. Last December, I remember, wind blowed cold, baby, the wind blew cool. When you hear that watchdog howling, somebody around, baby, somebody around. This next verse tells of a superstition I've heard in lots of places. I bet you've heard it too. When you hear that hoot owl howling, somebody dying, baby, somebody dying. These next couple of verses are verses of defiance. Hammer falling from my shoulder all day long, baby, all day long. Ain't no hammer in this mountain. Outer ring's mine, baby, outer ring's mine. I love this next verse. Well, this old hammer killed John Henry. Didn't kill me, baby, didn't kill me. You can almost hear the sneer. So I'm going back to Swannanoa Tunnel. That's my home, baby, that's my home.
Yeah.
So that's about as local a song as you can get. And
Yeah.
both a combination of complaining, but also sharing some information and some defiance. And one of the things that I found that workers that have difficult jobs, like on the railroad, coal miners or below surface mining, they're really proud of their jobs. They're not complaining because they don't want to work. They know they're doing something that most people can't do, and they're rather proud of it. They just wish they'd get treated better. Well, here's another one from the railroads. My favorite banjo player was a banjo player from Virginia named Clarence Tom Ashley. I never met him. I wrote him a letter asking, I said, I'd like to meet you, and I got a letter back from his widow saying he passed away. And so I wrote back to her and asked if I could come up and meet her because I wanted to learn more about Tom Ashley. And I went up and we had a wonderful time. She shared with me his instruments, talked with me about his life, let me record his old 78s on my cassette player. And one of the songs that he sang is this next one. And I first started singing it again as a banjo tune, but later learned it started out as a track lining song. It's called The Walking Boss. The Walking Boss is their name for the foreman, and the foreman's job is to make sure everybody worked, and he got paid more than everybody who worked, so they didn't like him very much. Let me get this retuned before we...
While you're tuning, yeah, I worked on the railroad. I was a linesman for the PB&N Railroad in Bethlehem, Pennsylvania.
Oh, wow.
They basically serviced Bethlehem Steel.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit larger than that, but most of the work that I did was right around Bethlehem Steel, and so I was doing those work songs.
Oh, yeah.
And these guys, it was an all-Italian gang.
Oh, my gosh.
And so they had their own work songs or
Mm-hmm.
their own ways of creating rhythm, to keep everybody in line and in motion and in sync.
Yeah.
It's amazing. You get these big Italian guys with a hammer in each hand
Mm-hmm.
doing this.
Yeah.
And hitting the
Hitting
spike.
the spike every time.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, they were amazing.
Yeah.
Which brings up another issue that in all these labor songs, there were all sorts of different ethnic groups that were working. Here, mainly African American on these railroads, the ones you were talking about, Italian. Of course, out in the West, they were Chinese. Up in the Northeast, they were Irish.
Mm-hmm.
In the Lumberwoods, they were Irish, American Indian, Scots-Irish, French, Canadian, just all sorts of peoples. And for the most part, they worked together in harmony.
Mm-hmm.
Imagine that might have been your experience. So anyway, The Walking Boss, as a track lining song, it went, walking boss, walking boss, walking boss, I don't belong to you, I belong I belong, I belong to the steel driving crew. One of the reasons I learned to play the banjo was so I didn't have to work so hard.
That's work. That's real work.
That is real work. Yeah. Anyway, same thing's going on here. We've got a African American work song being played on an African instrument, the banjo, coming out of the mountains. This is a white Appalachian banjo tune. Walking boss, a walking boss, a walking boss. I don't belong to you. I belong, I belong, I belong to the steel driving crew. Son, what can you do? I can line a track, man a jack, line a track, and I can do trouble too. Walking boss, walking boss, walking boss. I don't belong to you. I belong, I belong, I belong to the steel driving crew. I like this work week in this next verse. Well, I worked one day, just one day, just one day, then lay around the shanty too. You walking boss, walking boss, walking boss. I don't belong to you. I belong, I belong, I belong to the steel driving crew.
Yeah, I like the music in that song.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one. You could write your own song to that rhythm. I mean, to that music, and
Yeah.
that would be fun.
What I need to do is sing that song around a little bit more.
That's a good one.
You know, today working people still have a hard time, and one of the things our current administration keeps trumpeting is that the economy is doing so well,
Mm-hmm.
and they passed that massive tax break, and most of it went to the upper 2%. And the theory was it was going to trickle down to workers,
Mm-hmm.
but for the most part, wages have pretty much stayed
Right.
pretty stable. Amazon did go to $15 an hour, but try raising a family on $600 a week. So jobs are around, but just working people still aren't getting paid what they deserve.
Right.
And especially very important working people like teachers.
Yes.
You know, that's why we're having these strikes all over the country.
And North
they pay them
Carolina's
well.
kind of the poster child for that issue. For
Oh
sure.
boy.
Yeah. I've got a good railroad story, just to pass a little time. On the PB&N Railroad, Pennsylvania, Bethlehem, and New England that I worked on one summer, we had an Italian gang, and we did not use any machinery. They had these big tamping device machines that with pound the nails into the ties and everything, and it would keep from having to, do the manual labor part of swinging the hammer and all that kind of stuff. And there was this great big project, this big job that had to be done very fast, and a big, long, straight stretch of track. And we had to change all the ties and put down new track, and our boss, our foreman, track boss, didn't use any kind of equipment, surveying equipment to line up the tracks for long distances. He just eyeballed it. He did everything by eye.
Wow.
And we didn't use any machinery. And what we'd do is there'd be 2 or 3 gangs, because there were a lot of different gangs, working the railroad. But they put them all together to get this job done real fast. And it was a track that had 2 or 3 lines going side by side. And we'd start off and we'd have a competition. We'd all start at the same time, and we'd get these guys with the big machines and the tampers and everything else, and our gang always won with no machinery.
Wow.
It was pretty amazing.
Yeah.
And no, survey equipment or anything, just eyeballing the track down through there. It was great.
Some of those people really knew their jobs.
Yeah. It was a fun job. I loved those people. It was a lot of work, but when you're young, you don't think about that an awful lot. But still, those guys were great to work with.
Yeah. I worked summers at a community college doing construction, and I enjoyed the people that I worked with too. Yeah.
What else you got for us here?
Well, let's stay here in North Carolina, and we'll go up into the Boone Blowing Rock area. As I mentioned probably on our last program, one of my favorite Appalachian singer is Frank Prophet. I never met him. I knew his son Frank Jr. quite well, but I never met Frank Sr. But Frank Sr. was a remarkable man. He was the source of the ballad Tom Dooley, among other things, and Frank Warner collected it from him, as I mentioned the last time, in 1938, and that was the version that was eventually made their way to the Kingston Trio. But this next song is one of the most powerful songs that I know. As you know, here in the Appalachians, we run through these cycles of droughts and rain and droughts and rain and droughts and rain. 2 years ago, we had fires all over the place. We're looking for 4 to 6 inches of rain in the next couple of days here. This last spring, the Nantahala flooded to the extent that rocks were actually moved. The force of the water was so strong. So we go through these cycles. Well, anyway, in the 1930s, there was a drought up here in North Carolina in the Appalachians. And in those days, of course, the people were still pretty much growing their own food. And so the farmers went out and they planted their food and planted their crops, and it didn't rain, and it didn't rain. And the crops were withering in the ground. And as you know, here in the Appalachians, we have a church or two. So they decided that they would have a special Pray for Rain Sunday. So on this special Pray for Rain Sunday, everybody went to church and they prayed for rain, and they prayed and they prayed and they prayed, and their prayers were answered. And it rained and it rained and it rained. And as you know, the crops are planted in the bottomland, so these crops that were previously parched all of a sudden were being flooded out by this water running down the hillside. And it's ironic to us today, but it wasn't funny to them in those days. And Frank wrote a song about it, and I say it's one of the most powerful songs that I know. This is a homemade fretless banjo. I played it on the last program we did, made by Clifford Glenn, 4th generation Appalachian instrument maker up in Watauga County. Sadly, he passed away a couple of years ago, but beautiful banjo. Worked all through the wintertime, worked all through the spring, planted my corn and taters, and then it wouldn't rain. Not a thing for a poor man in this world. Went up on the hillside, got down on my knees, said, oh Lord, won't you let it rain some please? It's not a thing for a poor man in this world. When upon the hillside for rain I did pray, along come a great big flood and washed everything away. It's not a thing for a poor man in this world. Honey, honey, don't you cry. Things will get better by and by. It's not a thing for a poor man in this world. Worked all through the summertime, worked all through the fall. Lord, I spent my Christmas in a pair of overalls. It's not a thing for a poor man in this world. It's one of my favorites. Just such a very simple but moving song.
It works well with that banjo too.
Oh gosh, yeah. Yeah. That's what he wrote it on. Yeah. Well, we're gonna stay close to home. That song was obviously about difficulties farming. And this next song is also about difficulties farming, but in a different way. This is about tenant farming. And there were tenant farms actually here in the Appalachians in western North Carolina. This next song actually comes from Transylvania County here in North Carolina. Goes back to around 1935, apparently written by a farmer named Claude Reeves. There was a very famous song, the name of which escapes me, not Robert's Farm, but down on Penny's Farm, which was in that wonderful anthology that Folkways put out.
Oh, there's Down on Yasgur's Farm.
Oh.
No, we won't go there.
And Bob Dylan took the melody and the same idea and wrote another song. But this is anyway from Transylvania County. One of the things that's mentioned in here is a chattel mortgage. A chattel mortgage. Most of us are familiar with mortgages on our land and on our cars and stuff. But a chattel mortgage is a mortgage on your owning, your personal property. Because the tenant farmers didn't own the land. They lived on the land, and they were there at the mercy of the landowners. And what they were supposed to do is a portion of the crops went to the landowner, but they also had bills to pay and things of that sort. And so a chattel mortgage was if you didn't pay your bills, they could come and take your personal property. Anyway. Ladies and gentlemen, listen to my song. I sing it to you now, but you might think it wrong. It might make you mad, but I mean no harm. Just about the renters on Robert's Farm. And it's a hard time in the country, down on Robert's Farm. You move out to Mr. Robert's Farm, plant a big crop of cotton and a little crop of corn. He'll come around to plan and to plot. He gets a chattel mortgage on everything about it. It's a hard times in the country, down on Robert's Farm. Yonder comes Paul Roberts with a flattering mouth. He moves you through the country in a little log house. You got no window but the cracks in the wall. He work you all summer and he rob you in the fall. It's a hard time in the country, down on a Robert's Robert's farm. I moved down to Mr. Robert's farm. I worked on a dairy and I worked on a farm. I milked old Brenda when she had one horn. Tell to be a renter on Robert's farm. It's a hard time in the country, down on the Robert's farm. You go to the field and you work all day, way after dark and you get no pay. A little piece of meat and a little kernel of corn. Hell to be a renter on Robert's farm. It's a hard time in the country, down on a Robert's farm. Robert's renters, they'll go to town, their hands in their pockets and their heads hung down. We'll go to the store and the merchant will say, your mortgage is due and I'm looking for my pay. It's a hard time in the country, down on a Robert's farm. My pocket with a trembling hand. I can't pay you all, but I do what I can. The merchant jumped to the telephone call. I'll put you in jail if you don't pay at all. It's a hard time in the country, down on a Robert's farm. Mr. Paul Roberts with a big overland. A little tough luck, but you don't give a damn. He'll run you in the mud like a train on the track. He'll hand you to the mountain, but he won't bring you back. It's a hard time in the country, down on a Robert's farm.
Yeah. Listening to that song, I just had a realization. I guess I must be a tenant farmer. I'm gonna have to write my own song. I rent, and I have to share a portion of my garden harvest every year with my landlord.
Oh.
That's part of the contract.
Oh, wow.
And so things haven't progressed too far for some of us, you know. Yeah.
I'll have to get you a copy of John Hancock's biography.
Yeah.
Learn some songs to sing to him.
Yeah, he said he'd let me use the garden space if he could get, you know, a percentage of what I grew.
Mm.
So I didn't have any choice but to agree.
Yeah. But you enjoy the gardening.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Well, this next song, we're moving now into the cotton mills. And when I was working in South Carolina, I did a lot of work with the Brown Lung Association. Brown lung is a disease acquired by breathing in cotton dust and then later on the fibers of the other things they were using in the cotton mills. And so I have an affinity for these people. This next song is probably one of the most famous of the cotton mill songs. It was written by a woman named Ella Mae Wiggins. And it's from the Luray Mills over in the Gastonia area and dealing with the strike that came in 1929. What was going on is, well, first of all, Ella Mae Wiggins had 9 children, and 4 of them died. And her husband deserted her, and so she's left alone with these kids. And one of the things she tried to do is get off the night shift and onto the day shift so she could care for her kids, but they wouldn't let her do that. And she was born in around 1900 in Sevierville, Tennessee, but her father was a logger, so they moved around. And there's some biographers think that they actually spent some time here in western North Carolina in the lumber woods. And her parents died, and she married at the age of 20 and moved to the mills. And one of the things that was going on is they began this process of what the cotton mill workers called stretching out. That is, they would speed up the machines, so you had to work faster and produce more. There was no raise in pay. And where it affects us here in the mountains is one of the sources of labor was, this was during a period when things were tough in the mountains, droughts and that kind of thing, and a lot of the farms were failing, and so they would come up and recruit people from the mountains to go down and work in the cotton mills in South Carolina, Virginia, and North Carolina. And they would provide them housing, and for many people, it would be the first time they'd have a regular paycheck. Although even the paychecks weren't normal. They were paid in scrip, coupons. And the coupons were only good in the mill village, which was, all the stores were owned by the company. So in effort, you would work, they'd give you a scrip, you take your scrip and pay it back to them in terms of goods and services. But I found this quote that she said. She says, this is Ella Mae Wiggins, "I'm the mother of 9, 4 died of whooping cough. I was working nights, so I had to quit, and then there wasn't no money for medicine, and they just died." And they just died. There's a biography of Ella Mae Wiggins. I don't have it yet. I haven't read it, but there's a novel that just came out in 2017 that I've enjoyed very much. It was written by Wiley Cash, and it's called The Last Ballad. Last Ballad, and that's still around. I recommend it to people who are interested in.
Yeah, John Lane, the writer from down in Spartanburg, wrote a novel. If I can remember the title now, Somebody's Widow. That's the title. But anyway, it's all about the strike and how the mountain people went down to the mills to work because they couldn't find any way to make a living up here for the reasons you suggest. And then there was a big clash between the people down east and the mountain people during that whole strike and everything. It's a very good book too.
And in their heydays, the mills ran 3 shifts a day. And
Fate Moreland's Widow.
Yeah.
John Lane.
And what's it again?
Fate Moreland.
Fate Moreland's. I'm gonna have to look for that. I haven't read that one.
Great book.
Yeah.
Oh, it's really good.
Yeah, I'll look for it. Anyway, they ran 3 shifts a day, and one of the jobs I had when I was in South Carolina, I was living in a trailer park, and you could tell when the shifts were changing because almost everybody else in the trailer park worked in the nearby mill, and so there were 3 traffic jams every day. If you want to call 5 or 6 or 10 cars coming and going. Anyway, Ella Mae Wiggins wrote some really wonderful songs and some very powerful songs, and as a result of that, the mill owners didn't really care for her. And the story about how she died when this strike was going on in the Gastonia area at the Laurier Mills, she and some other workers were in the back of a pickup truck, and they were going to the strike demonstration, and a bunch of gun thugs came up and fired away at the people in the truck. And some say that they actually were looking for Ella Mae Wiggins. They wanted to get rid of her because her songs were so powerful. And also the story goes one of the gun thugs was a deputy sheriff. Which brings me to another point. Every time there were strikes and protests and things, and they called in the National Guard or the sheriffs or the police, they always came in on the side of the mill owners or the coal mine operators. Didn't come in on the side of the workers.
Right.
So, anyway, this is probably the most famous of Ella Mae Wiggins' songs. It was written in 1929. By the way, worked a 60-hour week for $9 a week. And as late as the 1960s, late 60s, early 70s, I interviewed a bunch of cotton mill workers, well, textile mill workers in those days, in the Lancaster area. And they talked about in the 20s and 30s they would work a 5.5-day week for $9 a week. So, anyway, from Ella Mae Wiggins, The Mill Mother's Lament. We leave our homes in the morning, we kiss our children goodbye, while we slave for the bosses, our children scream and cry. And when we draw our money, our grocery bills to pay, not a cent to spend for clothing, not a cent to lay away. And on that very evening, our little son will say, I need some shoes, Mother, and so does Sister May. How it grieves the heart of a mother, you everyone must know. But we can't buy for our children, our wages are too low. It is for our little children that seem to us so dear, but for us nor them, dear workers, the bosses do not care. Now listen to me, workers, both women and men. We are sure to win our union if all would enter in. I hope this will be a warning. I hope you will understand and help us to win our victory and lend to us a hand. But understand, all workers, our union they do fear. Let's stand together, workers, and have a union here. No Mother's Lament by Helen Lee.
That's another good one.
Yeah.
Again, these songs are bringing back so many memories. I apologize for my little asides, but you know, the whole thing about the cotton industry and the cotton mills and all. I lived for a year in Memphis, Tennessee, right across the street from Graceland. And Graceland was an old cotton plantation, and before Elvis bought it. And right in the field next to my house was an old cotton gin, and we used to go play in the cotton gin with the rats and and all the birds and the different critters that lived in the cotton gin at that time. And there was still cotton in there, you know, that had been left over from the days when they were, you know, really working the fields and processing the cotton in the mill and everything. It was a lot of fun for a young boy and 6 years old.
Yeah.
Never met Elvis, but, but that's
Well, that may have been a good thing.
I would have liked to have been Elvis.
Actually, I would have too. Yeah. Well, let's stick with the cotton mill. I thought I had a song here, but I think I'm not finding it right now. But maybe I can remember it. This is a medley of cotton mill songs. I lived in South Carolina, worked in with the South Carolina Arts Commission for a while. As I mentioned earlier, I worked some with the brown lung people, and also when they were American Civil Liberties Union was getting established, they would have me come and sing at their meetings when they were introducing themselves to the communities. And invariably, what I did were cotton mill songs. And we'll see how much of this I can pull out.
Okay, good luck.
We're all friends here, right? If I screw up, it's okay.
Yeah, we'll never know.
Oh yeah, we will. Anyway, these are a medley of 3 cotton mill songs. One of the things I meant to mention, that one verse of, well, of course, the Mill Mother's Lament was written by a woman. But women were very instrumental in all these movements. We've just seen Ella Mae Wiggin here in the Gloria Mill incident. We're going to sing Cotton Mill Girls, which comes out of South Carolina. Florence Reese's wonderful song, Which Side Are You On? We're going to get to at some point. We last that long. Anyway, this is a medley of cotton mill songs from South Carolina. Worked in the cotton mill all my life, I ain't got nothing but a barley knife, and it's hard times in this old mill, hard times in here. Now back in those days they worked for $1.50 a day, $9 a week. Went downstairs to get a drink of water, along come the buses, a dock you quarter, it's a hard times in this old mill, hard times in here. You can dock me a quarter, you can dock me a dime, and I'm going down and get my time, it's a hard times in this old mill, hard times in here. Hard times for cotton mill girls, hard times for cotton mill girls, hard times for cotton mill girls, hard times everywhere. See how much of this next song. This is the Winsboro Cotton Mill Blues. Winsboro was a cotton mill, textile mill town to the west of Columbia, South Carolina. Old man sergeant sitting at the desk, the darn old fool wouldn't give us no rest. He'd take the nickels from a dead man's eyes to buy a Coca-Cola and an Eskimo pie. I got the blues, I got the blues, I got the Winsboro Cotton Mill Blues. Come on, Lee. Lordy, lordy, schooling's hard, but you know and I know you don't
get the idea. No.
But this is a story, true story. When I was working with the South Carolina Arts Commission, I was doing a program in the northeastern part of South Carolina, not in Winsboro. And I sang that song, Winsboro Cotton Mill Blues. When I die, don't you bury me at all. Take me down to the spinning room hall. Put a bobbin in my hand, and I'll keep spinning to the promised land. I got the blues, I got the blues. And anyway, I sang that song. When you work for Tom Watson, you work like hell. A woman came up to me and she said, you know, I used to live in Winsboro. I used to work in that mill. I said, that song's right. When you work for Tom Watson, you work like hell. And those things keep the songs alive.
Right, and well, the blues tradition came out of these working songs.
Oh yeah, yeah. Well, it's all sort of a cross thing, yeah. Because one of the things going on is all these people had very similar problems, you know. So, well, we'll save this one. I don't know how we're doing time-wise here, but
we got some time.
I thought maybe make an example here of how church songs were used in the movements. And a lot of the hymns and the spirituals were used both in the labor movement and the civil rights movement. The program I did out in Washington State a couple weeks ago, I did a lot of old gospel songs that were used as civil rights songs. There was a wonderful family in Kentucky. Harry Sims, a song I'm probably going to get to in a little bit, was written by Jim Garland. His sister, Aunt Molly Jackson, also became well known as a songwriter. And then their other sister, Sarah Ogan Gunning, also wrote some really wonderful songs. I'm fixing to do one of hers here. And because the three of them were so involved in union activities, they were driven out of Kentucky. And Jim Garland wound up in Washington State. And years ago when I played at the World's Fair in Spokane, I wrote to him and said, I'm coming out to Washington, I'd like to meet you. And he said, well, I'd like to meet you too, but while you're in Washington State, I'll be in Washington singing at the Library of Congress. So I never did meet him. We exchanged some letters. Aunt Molly Jackson was a nurse, which made her the most medically trained people in the community they were living in. And one of the things she talks about in one of her interviews is one of her jobs at night, she sat up with a bat to drive away dogs that were coming to try to eat the babies who had died during the day. There was that much starvation and illness going on in those camps, and people were just dying. And she wrote some very powerful songs herself. She moved up to New York City, ran a cafe up there, and her music has been well recorded and documented and is still around. And then her sister, Sarah Ogan Gunning, moved out to Michigan. And she took the old hymn, Precious memories, how they linger, how they ever warm my soul, etc., etc. She took that old hymn and turned it into a Union song. Dreadful memories, how they linger, how they ever flood my soul, how the workers and their children die from hunger and from cold. Hungry fathers, wearied mothers, living in those dreadful shacks. Little children, cold and hungry, with no clothing on their backs. Dreadful gun thugs and stool pigeons always flock around our door. What's the crime that we've committed? Only that we are poor. When I think of all the heartaches and all the things that we've been through, then I wonder how much longer and what a working man can do. doesn't matter whether you are black or white. The only way that we can change things is to fight and fight and fight. We will have to join the union. They will help you find a way how to get a better living. For your work, get better pay. I always liked that song.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. And she has a wonderful recording. I think it's probably still available on Folk Legacy. She also was a really good singer.
I'm just sitting here looking at these sheets that you're using, here this morning, and I'm thinking, your repertoire is enormous, and I'm wondering, do you have files of all this older music that a lot of us have never heard before? A lot of these songs I don't know, so this is a real education for me. But a lot of it's handwritten, and some of it's typed. I'm just wondering what your files at home consist of, and what kind of an archive you have for this kind of music, just as an example.
Yeah. Well, over the last few years, I've been putting together notebooks of the different things. I've got a notebook of ballads I collected in Scotland. Got a notebook of the Adirondack songs where I was raised. Got several notebooks of those.
Soon to be a book coming to a bookstore near you.
Yeah, hopefully by next year. And I've got a number of notebooks of songs that I've learned throughout the Appalachians and the Sea Islands and so forth. So they're there. I pity whoever goes through my stuff when I die. Because, well, you've been to my house.
Yeah, how many shelf, what is it, linear feet they call it in the special collections of material would you say that you have that's, that you've collected over a lifetime?
Well, I don't know what linear feet means. It's a pretty big collection. Yeah, there's hundreds and hundreds of songs. Gosh, what a wonderful journey it is to go out and learn them. And to, as I mentioned the last program we did, one of the things I didn't anticipate when I was going out to learn these songs was the wonderful people I'd meet, like Frank Prophet Jr. and Marjorie Lansing Porter.
So a lot of this music that we're talking about, it's face to face. You've learned it from the people themselves.
Well, I decided when I was in college that I wanted to learn songs by meeting the people who sang them rather than getting them off of records and off of songbooks. Can't read music anyway. But now a lot of these I didn't meet these people. The tunes have come from recordings because, as I say, I can't read or write music.
But you remember all the tunes. I mean, you've got the lyrics, but you remember the tunes. Yeah.
And the lyrics are coming back some, and feeling more comfortable with them. Unfortunately, practiced a little bit before I came.
Share another one with us. You got
Well,
one there?
yeah, I thought while I was doing hymns, I'd take another hymn, and this was used more as a civil rights song, but it was also used as a song during the labor movement. It was used during the anti-war movement and the Vietnam War period. For our Spanish friends out there, I'm going to attempt a verse in Spanish, and the word operative term here is attempt. But this is this old spiritual. I shall not be moved. I shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. I shall not be moved. Well, they took the I, changed it to we. We shall not be moved. We shall not be moved, just like a tree planted by the water. We shall not be moved.
So that last verse was that Spanish?
Spanish, yeah. No, no, we will not be moved. No, no, we will not be moved. Like a tree. Como un árbol firme junto el río.
Oh, okay. Right.
That's what I was trying to say. Sometimes we get credit for trying. When I did the China tour with Wu Man, I learned in Chinese the phrase, I'm very happy to be here. Mm-hmm. And I was the last person introduced in the concert, and they would always applaud when I said that line. They were glad I at least tried. Yeah. Well, we were talking about Jim Garland. Maybe we didn't mention his name per se, but Jim Garland was Aunt Molly Jackson and Sarah Ogun's brother. And he was involved in, all three of them born and raised in Kentucky, and all were involved in the Union movement. And as I mentioned earlier, all three of them were driven out of Kentucky. And Jim Garland wound up out in Washington State. And he wrote a song about a friend of his. This was a young Union organizer named Harry Sims. He was 19 years old, came down into the coal country in Brush Creek, Kentucky, and was working to organize the workers. And one day he was walking along the railroad tracks, and these gun thugs that were hired by the coal companies, they came up to him and shot him in the stomach. His friends took him to the hospital, and the hospital, which was owned by the coal company, said, no, we won't treat him until we have guarantee you can pay his bill. And by the time they got enough money to pay his bill, Harry Sims had bled to death. Well, a short time later, some gun thugs were coming down a road out in rural Kentucky, and they were met by Union people. And they killed the gun thugs, and their heads were found on one side of the road and their bodies on the other. There was violence on both sides during this time, but this is a very powerful song. This is a quotation from Harry Sims. It's my job to lead the miners to Pineville, Kentucky, and gun thugs or no gun thugs, I'm going. If they pop me off, don't waste time grieving after me. Keep right on going. And come and listen to my story. Come and listen to my song. I'll tell you of a young man who's now dead and gone. I'll tell you of a hero. His age it was 19. He was the bravest Union man that ever I have seen. Harry Sims was a pal of mine. We labored side by side, expecting to be shot on sight or taken for a ride by them dirty coal operator gun thugs who roam from town to town, just shooting down them Union men where'er they may be found. Harry Sims and I was parted at 5 o'clock that day. Be careful, my dear brother, old Harry, I did say. Now I must do my duty, was his reply to me. If I get killed by gun thugs, don't grieve after me. Harry Sims was walking up the tracks one bright sunshiny day. He was a youth of courage, his step was light and gay. He did not know the gun thugs was hiding on the way to kill our dear old comrade on that bright sunshiny day. Harry Sims was killed in Brush Creek in 1932. He'd organized the miners into the NMU. He gave his life in struggle, that was all that he could do. He died for the Union and he died for me and you. Harry Sims. Well, the NMU was the National Mine Workers Union, and that had some communist backing, some communist influence, and once that was discovered, that was the end of the NMU, and it was replaced by the UMWA, which then sadly went on to become one of the most corrupt unions in American labor history. But then the coal miners found out the best way to run a union is just take it over and run it yourself, which is what they did when the corruption came in. Now, so.
Well, if you got a good banjo song for us, we can go out with a banjo song.
Let's go out with one of my favorites.
Yeah.
One of the best known of these songs was written by a Kentucky coal miner's wife named Florence Reese. And one day, during one of the strikes in eastern Kentucky, some gun thugs came into her house, just broke into her house, looking for her husband, who had been involved in the union activities. And after they left, she was so angry she ripped a page off her calendar and wrote this song, which went on to become one of the best known of our songs. And this is another song which has gone around, been used in lots of places, all sorts of labor movements, civil rights movements, anti-war movement. And I'm going to sing it the way Florence Reese wrote it. She lived in Harlan, Kentucky. The song was written in 1931. Sheriff J.H. Blair ransacked their home looking for her husband. And as I said, she tore off a calendar, a page from the war calendar, and wrote this song. From all of you good workers, good news to you I'll tell, of how the good old Union has come in here to dwell. Which side are you on? 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 We've started our good battle, we know we're sure to win, because we've got the gun thugs are looking very thin. Which side are you on? 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 With pistols and with rifles they take away our bread, and if you miners hit it, they'd sock you in the head. Which side are you on? 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 They say in Harlan County there are no neutrals there. You either are a Union man or a thug for J.H. Blair. Which side are you on? 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 Oh, workers, can you stand it? Oh, tell me how you can. Will you be a lousy scab, or will you be a man? Which side are you on? 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 This next verse has a line, my daddy was a miner, he's now with the Air and Sun. That meant he was blacklisted. My daddy was a miner, he's now in the Air and Sun. He'll be with you fellow workers until the battle's won. Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on? Which side are you on?
Well, I know which side I'm on. I'm on the left side here today. And well, the clock on the wall says it's time to go, as they say, and we could go on and we could do this for a long, long, long time
Well, it's been fun.
with your repertoire and your knowledge of folk songs in general. So this is part two. We'll look forward to part three, and we'll come up with another theme another day. And all of you out there in TV land, thank you for joining us this morning on the Culture Hour, here on Mountain Stream TV, sponsored by the Canary Coalition. And you can find all of our shows and interviews on the mountainstream.tv. So go to Google, go online, and have some fun watching the interviews and the conversations that we've had here over the last year or two with various artists of all genres here in Western North Carolina. Until next time, I'm Thomas Rain Crowe here with Lee Knight, and we'll see you next time.